Okay. Aspen Institute of Sports recently estimated that this year, 2023, we will collectively spend $30 to $40 billion on youth sports. $30 to $40 billion. For comparison, the NFL last year, revenue that came in, $18 billion. 30 to 40 billion for youth sports, 18 billion for the NFL. It is crazy. What we're not going to do in our time today is really make a judgment on that. Is that right or wrong? What we're here to say is that we're spending this much money, and so what we're getting in return should be significant. There should be something good that comes from spending 30 to 40 billion dollars. In fact, the average U.S. household spends about $800 to $900 on one kid's primary sport each year. Like, that's a lot of money. Youth sports is super costly. Financially, that's one aspect of it, but it goes beyond finances. We can talk about the time as part of the cost. Like, this is costly for you all to be here today. This is part of the time. Think about all the time that goes into driving to and from youth sports practices, to games, to even having to get our kids back home, showered and clean and fed and put to bed. Like, all of that is factored into the cost of youth sports. And so part of the cost is it's timely. There's the emotional aspect of it too. There's an emotional cost. Think about how much emotional cost you're spending each Saturday cheering for your kids. Think about the emotional cost as you're trying to deal with coach and figure out schedules and practice and all that stuff. Think about the relational cost as you're trying to tell your family and friends and everybody else, here's the schedule for this week, here's what the rides are going to be. Youth sports is costly, and it's not just financial. And so what we want to talk about tonight is this question. What is that buying us? If we're spending this much on youth sports, if the cost is this high, the return on investment better be good. Unfortunately, for a lot of us, myself included, a lot of the times, I think that what I'm buying is just a better athlete, maybe better opportunities, maybe even a future scholarship down the line. Hopefully, at minimum, they're playing in high school. But it's got to be better than that for the amount of money that we're spending, the amount of cost that youth sports is. What we want to share tonight is that we think the cost, what you are buying, what you are paying for, is actually this. You have a front row seat, 50-yard line, front and center, to watch your kid go through just about every emotion imaginable through sport. Almost on a weekly basis. They're going to experience the highs and the lows, the elation and the exasperation, almost on a weekly basis. And then as their primary influencer in life, you get to drive home with them, sit with them over dinner, and process that. Like, there are very other avenues in life where we get a front row seat to watch our kids go through all of this stuff, and then have the opportunity to be the primary people that process it with them. So one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight is this idea of swimming upstream against the culture of youth sport. Because youth sport is going in one direction, but as Christ followers, Romans 12:2 tells us to not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So what does it look like for us to figure out what is the pattern of this world when it comes to youth sport? But then what does it actually look like for us to be transformed by the renewing of our mind and begin to swim upstream against that current? So it starts with us thinking rightly, thinking Christianly about youth sports, but then it also involves some really practical action steps as well. Before I pass it over to my friend, Dr. Ed Uzinski, who drove up from Ohio and literally got here like 30 minutes ago, 5-hour drive, I want to recognize that there's probably, hopefully there's a lot of parents out here, but there's also grandparents too. And so when we're talking about your kid or your child, you'll just have to make the intellectual jump. Okay, this is my grandkid or my grandchild. So hopefully you can do that. But Ed, you wanna talk about why us? Why are we doing this?
Thank you. Yeah, good evening, everybody. So yeah, I just got out of the car and glad to be up here in Grand Rapids with Brian. And so, just so you even understanding how Brian and I are together, we both work for Athletes in Action. Some of you might already know that about for Brian and Lindsay that go to church here. I've actually worked with Athletes in Action for 31 years with my wife Amy. So that's how we came in contact with each other. And literally for the last 8 years, he and I have been talking about sport culture in the context of ministering to college and professional athletes, but we've gone broader than that. As we were laughing this week as we were getting ready for this, we were just thinking, wow, we have worn so many different hats in this conversation. And even trying to think, okay, what hat are we wearing as we come together Thursday night? Because we both have competed at a Division I level, so we participated as athletes for our whole lives. We have coached. I was a basketball player. Brian was a cross-country guy. We both have coached, at least at an assistant level. Coached a ton with my kids. I've got 4 kids. All of them have been involved in sports. We have gone the intellectual route, so we're both book nerds. And so between us, we've worked on a master's and even a PhD towards understanding culture and sport culture. So we kind of wear that hat with each other. What's the other one?
Sports ministry.
We're in sports ministry, yeah, we already said that. So we've been doing sports ministry where we're actually working with athletes and trying to figure out where they come from, why do they think the way they think. And then finally, we're parents who have kids that are playing sports. And so those are all very, very different hats, and we've been trying to figure out how to do it in all of those different realms. So obviously here tonight, we're here tonight to talk about being parents. And I like what Brian just said. You know, the reality is sports it's a really good thing. So we were even talking like the last thing in the world we want to do is try to make it seem like sports is bad, or even that all that sport culture stuff is bad. We're not saying that. It just is what it is. This is the water we swim in today, okay? We're asking though, how do we get the most out of it? And if we're saying we're going to talk to Christian people, this part of culture, just like every other part of culture, winds up being stained by sin. It just does. It becomes humanist. It becomes more focused on something that God probably doesn't want in and of itself as it just kind of goes along. That's why I like that graphic that Brian made. We actually want to think, okay, if culture's going this way, how do we go back against that and get more out of it than what it even promises to give to us? That's really what we want to do. So, what we put together for tonight, again, this is just scratching the surface, and I know this is going to raise so many different questions, but we just want to put 7 perspective shifts that represent a renewed mind. 7 perspective shifts that represent a renewed mind when it comes to parenting our sports participating kids, okay? So, I mean, y'all are coming here from work and everything else. If you want to write these down, you can. They're going to say a lot to you fast. But if not, maybe we'll get it to you in some other way afterwards.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if they have registered, I will send you this entire presentation or even recording it, so I'll send you all this on the back end. So you can take notes furiously if you want. If you want to just sit back and enjoy, know that digitally it will be coming at you. Probably tomorrow, you can do that too.
So you hear this too before we start? Brian and I have both been on the failing side of everything that we're talking about tonight. So we totally get how to do it wrong, and we're both trying to figure out how to do it right based on what we've watched, what we listened to, what we've read, what we've experienced with our own kids, and that's where this is coming from. So you're probably going to see yourself a lot too on the side of not doing it well. Our goal is just to encourage us, how would we replace that? What would we replace that with? What's number 1?
Yeah, most of my stories are me screwing up, so you'll get to
Those are the easiest
we'll
ones.
get to see the not great side of that. Yeah, so with each of these, well, not all of them, most of them we have some sort of like light video to show. So some of this could feel heavy, but we're gonna try our best to keep it light at spots as well.
Aww.
Girl, she's tall.
Volleyball, basketball.
I mean, she wasn't just
Oh, she just can't.
soccer. Did you see little Hannah's already walking?
Yeah, her mom has her in movement classes.
Should we be in movement classes?
We need to get her in movement classes.
If she doesn't do movement classes, she'll walk late.
Then she'll run late.
Then she won't make the track team.
Google movement classes. All the gymnastics classes are booked.
The wait list is 3 years long.
So we needed to sign up.
Before you were pregnant?
Do you know when you went to
So
gym?
why? Do you want me to prep them?
I mean, she needs to refine her motor skills.
Okay, seems normal. Seems like every family would do this for their 2-year-old. To bribe someone to go into a class where they just roll around in their poop-filled underpants.
Do you see her squatting?
She is eating out of a dog bowl.
But that squat.
Her form is incredible.
Give her some extra weight. See how she does.
You know they say Olympians squat like that as babies?
An Olympian. She said she wants to try soccer.
I know, but it's too late. Every team's got tryouts, and they want 5 years experience.
It's a team for 4-year-olds.
I know, we're so behind.
Honey, you're 5. That means it's time to pick a sport.
No more of this waffling, like trying things for
No
fun.
more just running around without kicking
No more
things.
sitting there without catching
I
things.
saw you going down the slide the other day.
Slides?
I know that was fun.
It's just sitting.
So like, no pressure, but what's it gonna be?
Okay. Am I on? Are we good with this? Okay, we can switch back and forth. Okay, shift 1 is from driving to riding. We need to shift from driving the bus of our kids' youth sports experience to being a passenger in the bus that is giving helpful directions to our kids. And so when I say this, what I'm not saying is we stop being parents. I'm not saying we stop being adults. What I'm saying is we start to give some autonomy to our kids and let them speak into the process of youth sports. And I'm screwing up at this already, even as my 13-year-old son is going through sports, and I can see the gaps in him that are very easy to fix. If he would just practice with his left hand, he would be so much better. Lowell is a wrestling community, bud. You are pretty good at wrestling. If you just stop playing basketball and football and focus most of the year on wrestling, you could potentially be a state champion, get a scholarship. So I have not said this audibly to him, but these thoughts go through my mind all the time. This idea of like, I want to drive the bus because I'm a better driver than he is. And I know all the things to do to fix him, and if he would just listen to me, we could get it fixed. But here's what I know from almost 20 years of sports ministry experience. We probably got close to 50 between us. Hundreds of athletes that I worked with from high school to college to pro are miserable in their sport. And most of the time, the common denominator of that misery can be traced back to, most of the time, well-intentioned parents who just drove kids too hard. Time and time again, I'm sitting across from guys, and they're sick and tired of getting up for practice every morning. They're sick and tired of competing. It's just not fun anymore, and it has not been fun for a very long time. And at some point, sports stops being fun at some level. But for kids at the youth level, there should be a pretty heavy aspect of fun. And so what does it look like then for us to begin to make this shift? A guy by the name of Steve Magnus, who's a sports psychologist, wrote a book called Do Hard Things, and this is one of the things that he said. Whether on the athletic field or in the workplace, if your goal is to train toughness, you have to give people a degree of autonomy. You have to give people a degree of autonomy. That means you have to give people choices. If you want to build toughness, but also resiliency and resolve in kids at some level, you need to give them some semblance of a choice. Some semblance of a choice. And so what happens then when our kids are out there playing a game and we're the primary driver of them this entire time? They're playing a game and things get really hard. What's going to motivate them to keep pushing through it during a losing streak, or when they're sitting on the bench? And if it's mommy and daddy really wants this, at some point the law of diminishing returns sets in and their motivation is going to wane. But if it is, they have set the goals, they have chosen the sport, it's ownership on them. When those dark times come, they're hopefully going to find this intrinsic motivation because they're the one that said they want to do it. And then we, as the parents, get to stand aside and say, hey, this was your goal, and I know it's frustrating. How can I help you right now? We get to be the passenger in that process.
Brian, I was just thinking this as you were saying it.
That mic's a no-go.
Okay.
When you're saying choice, you're saying, you just said this, you're saying all the way from choosing whether they even want to play in the first place, which is really interesting. I'm going to come back to that in a second.
I don't know if that's what I'm saying. Maybe.
What are you saying?
Maybe. So I would say something like for some people, we want our kids to be active. That's a good thing. And so it's, hey, you're playing a fall sport. Which one do you want? Which one do you want to choose? So just because my son Hudson has played football the last 5 years, my assumption is that he wants to keep doing that. But what if before the season it was like, hey, fall's coming around, do you want to do cross country this year? Or do you want to do a different sport? I know he's not going to choose cross country, but even me giving him the option to say, do you want to do a different sport besides football? And for him to audibly say back to me, no, I would do football again. It's his choice now. And so he can look back on that and say, I told mommy and daddy I want to do this.
And you're even saying not to force necessarily practice routines and everything, because we all want that. You said you know what it takes to do this. You're saying at some point they gotta want to do it themselves.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
not just because you're making them do it.
Yeah, so one of the practical things we do is just to start asking better questions on the front end and then throughout the process that hopefully they can then look back when we talk about this all the time. We want our kids, when they're 20 years down the line, to come back home for Thanksgiving because of how we have acted with them in the area of youth sports. Like how tragic would it be if 20 years from now our kids are not coming home for holidays because we have driven them too hard in sports? Like we think this fall, but what if we thought 20 falls from now?
Well, and I want to just keep going with this, what Brian said about college athletes, that so many of them are miserable, not just because the sport has gotten harder, but because they have been being forced to perform, and they don't have relationships with their parents sometimes with outside of anything but this sport. And so part of them wants to be done with it, part of them feels like this has become my life and I don't have anything else, and they resent how they got there a lot of the times. It's interesting because I was thinking about, with my kids, I said I got 4 of them. I have my oldest son ended up playing college basketball in Ohio, but he stopped playing after his 3rd year. He was just sick of it. He just was done. He just didn't want to do it anymore. That messed with me. My daughter was on a great high school basketball team in her freshman year, like state ranked type team. She didn't want to play basketball. She said, I'm not playing basketball anymore. Her mom played basketball in college, my wife. And she didn't want to play anymore. And it like broke me and Amy's heart. And so we're like, no, we really want you to play, but then we didn't want to pressure her to play. She doesn't want to play. And she ended up not playing anymore. And then our youngest son, Trey, he wants to play lacrosse now. Y'all play lacrosse up here?
Yes.
So, okay, it can be big. I don't think I like lacrosse. The kid hasn't grown on me yet. And so, 12-year-olds like talking, Dad, can I start playing lacrosse? And I'm inside, I'm like, no, man, I don't. But it's everything you're talking about. They're actually choosing and saying, I would like to do this, and sometimes I'm saying, I don't want you to. In other cases, they're saying, I don't want to do this, and we're saying, I want you to.
Yeah.
Let them do what they want.
Just give them some autonomy in the process. Let's keep going, because that took way too long.
That's all right.
Heck,
Here's the second one.
We got a video to show for this next
Oh
one.
yeah, let's show it first.
Actually, no, we don't. Never mind.
I think so.
All right. Second one, from stats to sonship. From stats to sonship. So what do we mean by this? We have the opportunity and responsibility, and there's a lot of words here, but see if you can let them sink in, to reaffirm a grace-based love and really a grace-based positional self-worth, not performance-based for our kids as kids. We have a chance to consistently reaffirm to them that we love them because of who they are in relationship to us, and not based on how they perform or don't perform in their sport or other aspects of life. We're going to talk about sports tonight. Do our kids hear from us, you're okay with me regardless of your sports performance? You are okay with me. And my goal is to help you get beyond yourself and live with character. Do they feel that from us? I mean, that's kind of a convicting question. You're okay with me regardless of your sports performance. My goal is to help you become a person of character, to get beyond yourself and become a person of character. That's what I want for you. So, Brian and I were talking about this week. The story of the prodigal son. Y'all know that story, right? That Jesus tells a story where one of the sons basically curses his dad out and says, Dad, I wish you were dead. Give me my inheritance and I'm going to take off with it and do what I want. Dad gives it to him. He goes out. He lives crazy. He performs very badly, doesn't he? Behaves like a maniac. Blows all the money. He's living a crazy lifestyle. And he hits rock bottom. Comes to his senses and says, you know what I should do? I'm going to go back home. He comes back home. And what does his dad do? Not a trick question, y'all. He runs to him, doesn't he? Like he's really excited to see him back. He says, my son, the son that I thought was lost has come back, right? There's another son in the story, though, who also shows up as the son comes back. Remember him, the older brother? What's he do?
Gets mad.
He's mad, isn't he? And why is he mad?
Justice. Focused on justice.
Yeah, this isn't right. Like, I've been a good kid, and you're talking about throwing a party for this dude that lived completely horrible and wasted all your money and lived like a maniac. And the dad is trying, we talk about this with college athletes all the time, the dad is trying to, what Jesus is really trying to get us to see, is that we are loved unconditionally because of our position, our relationship to him. What would it look like if our earthly kids felt that same kind of security, that my love for you is not based on how you perform? I'm really not grading you. And again, of course, statistics, we're not saying they don't matter at all, okay? In the grand scheme of things, they really don't. In the grand scheme of things, what matters is that we're still in relationship together, and that if you don't find this anywhere else in your life, you will feel security in your position with me. How would you feel about trying to go back to the Father? Go back to the prodigal son real quick. What would keep you from going back home? What would keep you from going back and trying to go back home in the first place? Again, not a trick question. Shame, pride. What'd you say? It just embarrassed, right? You know you messed up. Everybody knows that feeling when you just feel terrible. And what a great surprise it is then, feeling all those feelings, that he goes home and he's greeted the way the Father greets him. You know, I think most of us maybe would choose not to go back home is because we expect to be greeted by the older brother. Like, that's what we expect to find all the time, even with God. In sports, way too often, what our kids, I think, end up experiencing is the older brother. They end up experiencing, it's not good enough. It's not good enough what you did. You didn't do a good job with this. You didn't meet the expectations that I had in any number of ways. That's what they wind up feeling when we emphasize their performance over their position with us. So one of the things we talked about even this week is, what if we started to measure success with a virtue-driven list instead of just a performance list? So what do we mean by that? These are the type of questions that we would start asking them, or start thinking about. Were you respectful to the coaches and the officials in the way things went today? Did you engage your teammates? What was your engagement with teammates like today? Did you quit when it got challenging, or did you push through? Did you keep a good attitude and stay engaged, or were you pouting when things didn't go against you? And I just wrote over all this. We're looking for a character performance instead of just a statistical performance. You can tell that Derek's story?
Yeah.
Tell it. Yeah, let me pass it to you. Go ahead.
Do you want to finish? Because I'm going to go right to my next point. We got to keep moving.
No, keep going.
Okay. Okay, I need the mic.
Like one mic. Okay, so let's talk about how this is done poorly, using me and my parenting as an example. We got a lot of my examples of doing this poorly. Probably when he was in 3rd grade, Hudson was playing his first year of tackle football. He was in the middle of a really good game, kind of gets to the end, we're down by a touchdown, and so his cousin, seconds left on the clock, his cousin throws a bomb, which is like 15 yards, doesn't go very far in youth football, bounces off Hudson's helmet into the hands of the other team. It's intercepted, and the game is over, and he's sitting in the middle of the field just crying, which is not surprising. He's like his dad. I did the same thing when I was a kid. Whenever I lost, I would cry. And so as a dad, I'm walking to the center of the field knowing, okay, this is one of those character building moments where I get to speak life into my son. Like, it's okay, buddy. You played a great game. You made tackles. You caught some passes. You did great. But when I got there, what he said to me completely threw me. He said, Derek said I lost the game for us, and he's being a real butthead. And I just went into dad protection mode. And so I looked at my son and I said, I'm sorry he said that, but did Derek make any tackles today? Did Derek catch any passes today? Did Derek score any touchdowns today? And he's he said, no, he didn't. And then I no joke, I looked him in the eye, I got down on a knee, and I was like, if anything, Derek lost the game. I'm dead serious, I said that. Derek was. But so in in that moment, what Hudson needed to hear from me was not a comparison to Derek, because that's what the world does, right? The world says you're either awesome or awful based on these other people around you. What he needed to hear from me was, Derek can have his opinion. Let me tell you what I think of you.
Okay.
Buddy, I love you. I'm proud of you. The best part of my day today was watching you give everything you have on the field today. And you have a choice now. Do you want to listen to Derek, or do you want to believe what I think is true? Because ultimately our kids, like, fortunately or unfortunately, at a young age, their primary view of God is going to come from us as parents. And so I want to reaffirm, you have a choice to listen to other people's opinion of you, or you can choose to believe what Daddy thinks about you. I corrected that later at night, but I completely blew it.
And it's okay to be disappointed that we lost and that you
For sure.
threw an interception. Like, you can still totally acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But like, you're good with me.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Love that.
Yep. Okay, let's move from product to process.
Come on, Carter! So you don't have him on skates yet, huh?
He's only 6 months old.
I guess hockey's not really his thing. Come on, buddy! Get it! Should probably start saving for college. Ah, good job!
That's probably my favorite of our commercials. Shift number 3 that needs to happen is we need to stop expecting final product maturity before our young athletes have even matured, physically, mentally, or emotionally. And again, I'm going to use my own life and stories as an example here. Hudson, my oldest, just got done playing in a Gus Macker tournament, 3-on-3 basketball in Belding about 3 weekends ago. And he is like, he's small compared to these other dudes. They had mustaches. They could almost dunk. I'm not kidding. They played against kids with full facial hair. And so what I'm thinking then as I'm watching is, he's never going to make it as a basketball player.
Yeah.
Like, look at Hudson compared to these other kids. They're bigger, taller, stronger, faster, and more skilled than he is. And so I'm thinking he should probably focus his attention on wrestling, or maybe he's finally going to be a distance runner like his daddy. And so here's the truth of that. Like, what may be true is he might not make it as a basketball player. Again, whatever make it is, right? Whatever make it is.
Yeah.
Hudson might not make it as a basketball player, but it's wrong thinking on my part to make a judgment at this stage when he's 13 years old compared to kids who are at a different level of maturity than he is to make that decision at that point. This is oftentimes what we do. If you look at the kind of the bottom line here is the kid's age and the top is the skill angle. We see, I put in quotes for a reason, the star athlete, because it's all relative, right? The star athlete oftentimes is so much better than what would maybe be the JV type athlete. There seems to be this huge gap in between. And what we do wrongfully as parents oftentimes is we assume that in the next 2 to 3 years, this graph is just going to continue along the same trajectory. It's going to continue along the same trajectory, so that in 3 years, the star athlete is going to be twice as good as our kid is now. But maybe you guys actually have the star athlete, and you're assuming that in 2 to 3 years, they're just going to keep getting better and better. Oftentimes, and this is anecdotal evidence from just 20 years doing this, this is usually what happens. JV type kids catch up. They eventually catch up. You need to let them be where they're at and let the process play out. Because what happens? Growth spurts, puberty, motivation, the experience of always being the littler one who always has to try a little bit harder to compete, and so they grow in skill level. And on the opposite side, what you have happen a lot of times with the star athletes who are just naturally bigger, stronger, and faster, other people catch up. Other people eventually catch up, and what begins to happen is they struggle with, I've always been able to outrun and out-hit everybody, but now that people are my same size and same speed, I'm struggling with how to operate. And so what does it look like for us then to help make this shift, to help embrace the process? I would start with this. When they play, stay away. When they play, stay away. During this Gus Macker training a year ago, our boys had this practice on our basketball court. Some of your kids were at our court. They were playing 3-on-3 against one another, and there were probably 4 of us parents there. And what happened is, us parents, me included, once again, got involved in every aspect of this practice. And so we were calling timeouts. I was yelling on the sideline, make him go left, because I knew this kid couldn't make a layup with his left hand. And so what happened is we elevated the tension. What do you think happens with the kids?
Stresses them out.
Stress. And they begin crying, and it's not fun for them anymore. We inserted ourselves into this game, putting our model of what success should look like, this college pro type model. We put it on these middle school kids, and they were miserable as a result of it. This year, that same group came out to our court, and I was like, oh, one, I was in the class, so I couldn't be out there, but I was like, I'm not going to say anything. And so I went out there from time to time when I was on a break in my class and just watched and didn't say anything. No tears, no stress, laughter. They were figuring it out. So one of the things as parents I think we need to be okay with is just allowing our kids to have as much adult-free playtime as possible. Because at some point, it's gone. But we oftentimes start it way too early. And then avoid the comparison game. I think maybe even into high school, but especially before high school, we have a tendency to overreact based on where our kids are at, stacked up against other kids. And so I'm not going to say like getting private coaching and all that stuff is bad, but I would caution against, if my kid is stacked up against somebody who has full-on hit puberty and is just at a different maturity level, and letting that be the reason why we're doubling down on training sessions, practice, and travel leagues, I just don't think that's a wise decision. Let them be where they're at, trust the process, and understand that over time, what's probably going to happen if they have internal motivation, they will catch up. It usually happens. And you want me to make a graph that shows them surpassing, because sometimes that happens. Sometimes the JV type kid gets better. Yeah.
I think it happens a lot that the kids
That you think are not any good in 5th grade are suddenly stars as juniors. And the reason why kids are good, the reason why you have a star in your home in 5th grade is why in basketball. They can make a layup. And maybe can dribble a couple times without dribbling it off their foot, and everybody else can't do that. So they're the star. They score 20 a game because they actually can finish a layup. Well, everybody's going to be able to make a layup in a few years. That's what Brian's saying. I was thinking, even as you were talking, Brian, part of the reason why this one is so important is to monitor my own stress. Because my own stress about thinking that they're behind or that they're not getting to where they need to be right now at this stage starts to come out in really weird ways. And they feel it. They feel it from us. It leads right into the next one, right?
Yep. So just listen to what you hear here.
Nice effort, goalie. Okay, so this is a game called soccer. They're not playing soccer yet. What are they doing? They're some stumbling might be better to say than running, but they're just kind of running around chasing a ball, right? So that's number one. They're not playing soccer yet because they don't know what they're doing, okay? What are people saying to them? And again, you guys, this could all be us sitting on the sideline, right? Like again, we totally get it, but let's step into it. This is like massively transformational if you get this. You'll start to see things really differently. What are people saying to them?
Be ready.
Be ready.
Score.
Kick the ball.
Run.
Pass it. Run. What else?
Score.
Score. This, that, the other. Okay, go back to number one. They have no idea what they're doing. None. If the coach is any good, he's given them a couple things to think about, neither of which are they able to think of at all. Because there's 50 people screaming stuff at them the whole time, right? Totally good intention, right? And it's like contagious on the sideline, right? Everybody's yelling like crazy at them. What do you think it's doing to the kids? Seriously. It's confusing them. It's stressing them. It's making them feel, again, they don't even know what they're doing, but they know they're not doing it well based on what everybody's doing on the sideline. Like, well, I'm really messing up. I'm not sure even what I'm supposed to be doing, but it's not good based on what's happening, right? They may not say it, in fact, they usually won't. They want actually, some of the most entertaining stuff in the world is when one kid finally says, "Shut up." Hey, that's been your kid before, right? Like, we've had that. But most of the kids are never going to say anything. They're just internalizing failure. They're resenting us. We're making it more difficult for them to play a sport, to play a game. It only gets worse from there, right? Did you have something you were going to throw in the back end of that, Brian?
Yeah, again.
Okay.
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like The Price is Right. Anybody remember that show? Where like you get the person up there and they have the appliance, they need to figure out how much it costs, and instead of like them thinking, okay, $400, everybody's screaming, and you can see it in their face, just like they're overwhelmed. $450, $500, $499, and they're just like, they don't know. That's what our kids experience oftentimes in sport. There's all these voices yelling, and it's hard for them to process what's going on. And so what do they need? What do they need from us in that space? What they need is not for us to tell them, kick it, shoot, run faster, pass, because they're trying to do those things. What they need is a calmer environment. They need silence at some level to learn how to make these decisions for themselves. And so even going back to like, how do we go all the way back to the book of Genesis? God is a creator. How do we image God? By creating ourselves. And one of the things we do as we create is it starts with thinking of things. Okay, I'm thinking, and then I'm doing, and I begin to create. When we are constantly saying, shoot it, pass it, run, we're robbing our kids of the ability to think and process on the spot and think creatively and to figure this stuff on their own. Like, what if we just stop talking?
Just be quiet.
And just let them figure it out? And they would realize, like, hey, maybe it's not good that we're all clumped together and running around in a big blob. Like maybe they would figure that stuff out in soccer. Maybe they would learn new skills because they have space to process and they don't have somebody telling them what to do all of the time.
Yeah. Maybe they would just learn to do what the
One coach is telling them to
Maybe.
do, which is, again, it's super confusing when there's so many different coaches. So, there's a lot of places in the Midwest that will have silent soccer tournaments where the whole weekend there's an agreement amongst the parents that they're just going to be quiet. They're not going to be the ones that are filling the air with noise. If you ever try this, if you do anything with this at all, it's super difficult to do.
Yeah.
And you don't realize how much I do not realize how much I am talking during games until I've told myself that I can't do it right now. I went to a tennis match. I remember laughing at this with Brian a few years ago. I went to my first tennis match ever. I'd never been to a tennis match before. Have any of you been to tennis matches before? Okay, so I don't know if it's the same way up here, but in Ohio, like I was cheering and yelling, and somebody came up next to me and was like, "Yeah, you're not really allowed to say anything." And I was like, "Well, I'm not coaching. I'm just encouraging." Yeah, no, you don't say anything at the devil's gates. You just be quiet and watch. God, I've never seen that before. Guys, I was miserable. I was watching one of my friend's kids play, and it wasn't even my kid. I was just miserable. And when I can't say anything? No. And that's when I started to realize just how much I run my mouth at my kids at games. So it's been a great discipline. And again, you start realizing just how much noise is going on. You can relieve it. What can you say? I see you. I see you, Bobby. Trey. Attaboy. Sprinkle those in here and there. Really? See what happens.
Yeah, so we'll move on to the next point here, but what we're not saying is don't cheer for your kid. Like that's part of what makes sport amazing and fun, is to be out there and to run around and have people cheer for you. So we're not saying like every sports and youth event needs to be silent like forever. We're just saying, what would it look like to start taking inventory of the words that come out of our mouth?
Yeah. Try silence.
Like,
Try silence for a while and see what comes out of that.
It's really hard. I've tried that a couple times. It's really hard to be silent and not begin to judge other people and realize, oh, that's what I sound like. Like, just try it. You will begin to take inventory of what comes out of your mouth. Is it helpful or not?
That's good work.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, let's keep moving.
So, not your best practice. Can we agree on that? It seemed like you wanted to hang out with your friends more than practice. And that's fine if that's what you want to do. You know, just tell me. Because you can do that anytime. Maybe we can skip your next game. Because choosing to waste your time, that's one thing. But wasting my time and your coach's time? That's selfish. You don't care about other people. You don't care about hard work. You don't care about teamwork. That's why you're always on the bench. Every time it matters. Your coach is like your challenge. You're not the coach. Your son, coach, your football coach, everyone else. So, if you want to keep playing, you need to take a good hard look at yourself and think about that.
Right, that one will mess with you a little bit. So the next shift is from correction to connection, or from coaching to connection. And specifically, we want to talk here about the impact of the car or van ride to or from wherever you're going. That has an opportunity to be sacred space for you and your kids. It also has the opportunity to be space that makes them not want to come home for Thanksgiving in 20 years. It is so incredibly strategic. So again, just think of all of the emotions your kids are going through as they play sports. Sport really is, it's life with the volume turned up. They're experiencing the highs and the lows, and then on the way home, they're hopping in the car, and I'll start with me. What do I want to default to saying? I want to coach. Hey, when you were going out for that pass today, maybe next time, like, move towards the sideline instead of cutting upfield. Or you did a really good job on, I want to talk about the game. I want to process. And not because I'm ill-intentioned. I like sports, and I love watching my kid, and I want to talk about it in the car. One of the things I started doing, though, last year is on the car ride home from games, I just start with, hey, is there anything you want to talk about from the game today? 99% of the time, you know what his response is? Nope. Can we listen to music? Sure, buddy. Sounds good.
I really resent Brian for telling me that he did that.
Why?
Well, because it's true,
Yeah.
and because I've tried to apply it myself, and they really don't usually want to talk about it right after. They don't.
Yeah. Sometimes things need to be talked about, especially when they involve character. We have an opportunity to say, like, hey, I just want you to know I saw this in you today, and I'm really proud of what I saw. keep doing that. Hey, when you shook the hand of the ref after the game, keep doing that. Bring a teammate next time. That was awesome. Our kids have an insatiable appetite to know to want to know that they're loved, that we're proud of them, and that they're enough. The car ride home or the car ride there is our opportunity to teach that to them. It's our opportunity to teach that to them. Proverbs says, the heart of a man is deep waters, and a man of understanding draws them out. That's the same with our kids. Like we have an opportunity in that sacred space to pursue their heart, to pursue their character. And as much as we want to talk about the game, what would it look like for us to pursue character? Quick story, I've shared enough about how I've screwed this up. Here's one thing I've done well in the last year. On the drive to a wrestling match last year, had a bunch of kids in the car. Right before they get out, hey guys, how are we feeling about the match today? One of my nephews said, I'm a little scared. And so sport culture, like what would I normally say in that moment is like,
Suck it up, man.
hey, you got it.
Yeah.
You've put in the training. He's the same size as you. You got this. Just try to be tough. You got it. In that moment, what he needed from me was not, he didn't need motivation coming from years of sport. What he needed was for me to meet him where he was at. And so I said, tell me more about that. Well, last time I wrestled the same kid in the entire match, he kept shoving my face in the mat. And so again, I could say, you just gotta toughen up, you got this. I said, that's really hard. If I was in your shoes, I'd probably be feeling the same way that you're feeling. And I want you to know I'm really proud of the courage it's gonna take you to get out there and wrestle this guy with how you're feeling right now. And guess what happened in the match? He lost. He lost. But that wasn't the win, right? He's hopefully hopefully this parent's house. The win in that moment was next time he has these feelings that maybe he would feel ashamed to bring up to somebody, and I'm in the car with him, and I ask a question like that, he feels safe enough to say, like, I can share what's really going on with him, because I know he's not going to give me some crap that I'm going to hear from a sports motivator. He's going to actually empathize with where I'm at. And that happened in the car. Like, the car is one of the most strategic places for sport ministry with our kids.
So Brian and I were laughing about this
week because I had just seen this week, this video, and it's on YouTube, and I went and read the comments. Well, over 50% of the comments were people saying, he deserves it. Like, the kid deserves it. What if the stuff that dad is saying is actually true? Like, the kid is being self-centered. He's not being a good teammate. He's not putting in effort, okay? I was like, that's actually a pretty good point. So what we talk about, though, is just like in a marriage situation, it is a wise person who studies their spouse to know when is a good time and when is a bad time to try to bring up what might be a difficult thing to hear, right? If we do that well, we're paying attention to where this has a chance of working right now. It definitely won't work over here. And in the same way, what we're saying is after the game, after practice, almost no kid wants to be confronted with stuff like that. And again, there may be some character thing that needs to be snatched up right away, okay? But most of what we do is not that, okay? I'm afraid. And then second, just to realize that there's a way to communicate those things that gives you a chance of being more effective. And scolding and shaming and coming off, really, again, out of my anger or out of my disappointment or out of my frustration is not usually going to work, even if those are legitimate feelings that I have. So studying to know when the best time is, and our own discipleship I need to be changed so that I'll speak in a way that I can be heard. It's not natural. All right. What's the next one? Sixth one, two more, and then we're done. Rationalizing the responsibility. Our kids need us to model what it looks and sounds like to own up to shortcomings and confront their own excuses. So, what are excuses that you hear your kids make whenever they don't perform well or something doesn't go well for them? What's some of the stuff that you've heard your kids say?
The shoe came untied.
Shoe came untied. The stinking shoes. You bought me the cheaper shoes.
Yeah,
What else?
horrible.
It's the umpire's fault.
It's the umpire, ref, official's fault. Always, we can go to them.
I'm tired.
I'm tired. okay?
Other players.
They play dirty.
That's what I was, good. It's the other players, somebody was dirty on the other team, da-da-da-da-da. You know what's interesting to me is I hear parents say that stuff a lot. In fact, I ask myself, where are kids getting that from? Well, in some ways, we're good at generating excuses for ourselves at an early age, right? So they really don't need any help with it. But it was interesting, even my 12-year-old, Trey, plays basketball, and I was an assistant coach for him. And then there was this pattern where after almost every single game, he was coming home and the first thing out of his mouth was to complain about the refs. First thing out of his mouth. And I was at the game. And I'm just like, Trey, two things. Number one, the refs had very little to do with what happened today. Really. We can't make any layups except for the one kid who's a star right now that I hope you catch up to someday. Okay. We don't make layups, that's why we lose. It had very little to do with anything that happened with the refs, number one. Number two, I think you're doing this because everybody else is saying this stuff. And I want you to know, in our house, we're not doing that. I don't ever want to hear about the refs anymore. I don't want to hear about them. They're going to make mistakes. Yes, they're going to be messy. Let's control what we can control. But let's go work on making layups, right? So, I have a responsibility as a parent. We've been saying this the whole time. How do we start to think differently? I need to make sure I'm not always making excuses or blaming the kids or the coach or the refs. I'm not yelling all the time in the stands, again, at the refs and the coach and the players. Oh my gosh, there's so many stories I want to tell, but we don't have time. Like, I've been to high school soccer games where parents are yelling at the coach at our high school. Like screaming at him, cussing at him from the stands. That's the kind of place I come from. And it's like, okay, well, why do you think your kid's acting like an idiot right now? Whenever the heat gets turned up, he can't control himself at all. I know why, okay? I know why. So, I gotta check myself, make sure that I'm not giving them an out, and just, again, encourage them. You control what you can control. I gotta ask myself, why is it that I'm always making excuses for my kids? Why am I coddling them? What's happening inside of me that's causing me to never allow them to just feel struggle and to feel some pain or to feel disappointment because they're not doing very well? It's okay. You want to do better, you can control that. You can practice on that, or you can do something different, but it's not everybody else's fault.
Let's go to number 7 then.
Okay, shift 7, from enraged to enjoying. What our kids need from us and what we need from ourselves is to enjoy watching our kids play without stressing about the outcome. I'll start with this. It's okay to laugh in sport. Like, it is okay for us to just relax and to laugh, and it's okay for our kids to laugh and relax too. There should be an aspect of sport, especially at the youth level, that just embraces this posture of joy. We need to give that back to our kids. We talked at the beginning about the high cost of youth sport. If we think that high cost is buying us just opportunities and good, competent referees and coaches who are going to help take our kids to the next level, all these things that sport culture promises, we are going to be disappointed. Because sport culture always overpromises and underdelivers. Always overpromises and underdelivers. If we have this expectation that what we're purchasing is going to buy all of these things for us when they don't actually happen, what do we do? Like, the rational response is to get frustrated by that, right? Is to get upset. And as Christ followers in this space, it's okay to pursue winning. Like, winning is not a bad thing. But in our pursuit of winning, if it causes us to act in un-Christ-like ways, we have messed up priorities. And oftentimes in youth sports, it's like one of 3 dominoes that needs to fall. And these dominoes are the adults. It's the coaches, the referees, and the parents. And it usually just takes one domino to fall before everything else goes. And I have plenty of examples. I'll just share one that happened in our community. Actually, I'm not going to share the community one. I don't want to out anybody. I'll share another story about myself. I'm on the sideline coaching a game. It's 4th down. Our team does not get it. We got it. Okay, we got it. I was right on the sideline. I saw our guy stretch the ball across. We even had a parent get it on video. The ref says he's short, turn the ball over on downs. I'm livid. Like, I am ticked off. I'm confronting the ref, and I even said to the referee, come to the sideline right now. We got it on video. I want to show you. Like, that's awful. That was a couple of years ago. I've grown a little bit. But that is, so who hurts from that? The next play, my team starts chirping at the refs. Where do you think they learned that from? What we celebrate, our kids will replicate. What we celebrate, our kids will replicate. And if we are constantly enraged and frustrated and yelling, our kids are going to say that. I want to be like mommy and daddy. I want to be like coach. And they're going to do the same thing. And so, what needs to change in this space? What would happen? What would happen if we got out of our car on a Saturday morning, if we sat down, put our cell phones in our pockets, greeted the parents that were next to us, maybe even greeted the referee and humanized them a little bit, and sat down. And when the referee makes a bad call, we remember he's making probably $10 to $15 an hour and has not been staying up all night figuring out what team he's going to prioritize over the next. And we just didn't say anything. That when little Johnny needs to run faster or shoot or pass, that we would just let the coach handle that instead of saying anything. That we would just sit in our chairs or the bleachers and watch and enjoy our kids being kids for as long as we can possibly enjoy them being a kid. What would that look like? And then, win or lose, for them to get in the car and for us to turn around in the back seat and say, man, I love you. I'm so proud of you. The best part of my day today was watching you play. Do you want to talk any more about the game, or do you want to listen to music? Like, what would happen in youth sport culture if parents started doing that? As a community, we start doing things like that. We don't have a whole lot of time for that. No, Lindsay's giving me the no. I'm not going to do the acronym. I'll email it to you. It's great. I'm closing. You know what I mean?
Say one thing.
Okay.
Here's the reality, though. Sometimes you get in the car, and I don't really love you right now. I'm not all that proud of you, and that was miserable watching you. Okay? So really, this is the work.
Yeah.
Is what is happening inside of me. This is real, right? That I've let that become my reality right now. For a game, again, I grew up in a football coach's home. Like, I love sports. Like, my hands sweat when I watch commercials. Like, I'm still 55 and I still just want to run through a wall, right? When certain music plays. But at the end of the day, like, most of what we really are caring about doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't matter whether who won that game that we watched in the supposed soccer thing we watched. But some coaches are acting at that age like it really, really, really matters. And I think we start to absorb that into ourselves. So maybe one of the takeaways is just to ask ourselves, because Brian's saying you gotta have a strategy where you start to think to yourself, this is what I know happens inside of me. This is what I want to matter. How do I play that out today when we go to this game? How do I just enjoy that I have this moment, my kid's on his feet and able to do something right now? How do I enjoy that so I don't miss it? And regret that I didn't, 5, 10, 15 years down the road, that I gave so much energy to stuff that doesn't matter and miss the moment with them. That's what we're really after. No, I'm done.
It goes back to the question of autonomy too, about giving them choices. My daughter Hadassah wanted to play soccer. Why? She wanted to meet friends and have fun. And so after the game, when they get beat 9-2, I'm not going to turn around and say, yeah, you really need to move more towards the goal when you're on offense. No, because that's not her goal, right? She wants to make friends. And so it's going to be like, hey, who'd you talk to today? And so to not, again, place my expectations on them. The cost of youth sports is incredibly high. What are we buying with it? We're buying a ticket. And this ticket is a front row seat to be able to pour into their character and to develop them. One of the things that we have done almost forever with Athletes in Action is teach college athletes this idea of a focal point, because we're trying to get them, what does it look like to worship in sports? And in the middle of a basketball game, you just forget about God and you default to how you've always done things. And so we teach them this idea of a focal point. So it can be a tattoo, a watch, it could be the scoreboard, but something that when they see it in competition or a timeout, when they see it, their mind will go, oh yeah, this is about worship, and they would remember God in those moments. And so a focal point is really, really helpful for us to snap out of our default rhythms that we've been in our entire life, and to remember there's a different, maybe a better way to do this. And so in the back, we actually have a focal point for you all. It's a ticket just like this. It's got Romans 12:2 on it. Admit one because you're the only person responsible for this. We have the price on there. Row 1, seat A. Like, you have a front row seat to this. It's your responsibility. We can no longer outsource the discipleship of our kids to the culture of sport. We need to do it. And so hopefully this would be something you would put in your car or on the counter, so that when you're coming home from sports or going to sports, you see it, you're like, there's a better way to do this. Maybe I can remember some of those things that we talked about that Thursday night. If one family does this, one family begins to implement these shifts, we see transformation in the life of one young athlete. When a community of people begin to practice these things, practice these shifts, what happens? Communities change. Communities change. This is the responsibility of us as a community to shift the tide of youth sports. So what would it look like for each of us collectively to own the process? All right, we said we were going to be on 6:30, 6:35. You are welcome to go. We're going to be here probably for the next little bit. If you guys have questions and want to talk, happy to answer questions and have conversations. So thank you guys for coming.